The massive research ship Xenological Wonder floated peacefully in Earth's orbit, like a silver whale among the stars. Inside its luxury observation deck, Professor Zekathera adjusted his 6 eyes to focus on the blue and green planet below. His forearms moved with practiced grace as he arranged his teaching materials on the crystal table. "Students, gather around," Zekathera called out in his deep, rumbling voice. His purple skin shimmered with excitement. "Today we begin our study of the 3rd planet in this system. The locals call it Earth, but our star charts list it as Terra 3. The group of alien students moved closer. Crystalline, who seeks knowledge, clicked her way across the floor, her diamond-like body catching the light from the viewing windows. The Nethmori student, Whisper of Gas, floated nearby in his containment suit, his cloudy form swirling with curiosity. 3 crystal drones buzzed together, their hive mind already sharing thoughts about the planet below. Zekathera opened his thick textbook. The cover read, Galactic Wildlife Classification Manual, 15th edition. He flipped through pages filled with pictures and charts. "According to our research, this world is classified as a developing planet," he explained. "The dominant species has only recently achieved space travel. The local wildlife should pose minimal threat to our advanced equipment." He pointed to a page in the book. "Look here. The creatures on this world are mostly small scavengers and herbivores, nothing like the great hunting beasts of Velthar or the acid spitters of Nethmor." Crystalline, who seeks knowledge, tapped the table with one crystal finger. "Professor, why are we studying such primitive life forms?" "Excellent question," Zekathera replied. "Even simple ecosystems can teach us about evolution and adaptation. Plus, this planet has an unusual variety of species for such a young world." The ship's communication system chimed. A calm voice announced, "Attention passengers. We are now receiving our local guide from the surface." Minutes later, the transport bay doors opened with a soft hiss. A human woman walked into the room wearing simple brown clothing and sturdy boots. She had short dark hair and carried a worn backpack. Her movements were smooth and confident. "Hello, everyone," she said with a smile. "I'm Dr. Sarah Chen. I'll be your guide during your visit to Earth." The alien students stared at her with fascination. She looked so ordinary compared to their expectations. No claws, no armor plating, no obvious weapons. Just a small, soft-looking creature with friendly eyes. Zekathera consulted his datapad. "Dr. Chen, your file says you were a terraforming specialist." "That's right," Sarah nodded. "I spent 20 years helping prepare planets for colonization. Now I work in wildlife conservation here on Earth." "Terraforming," Whisper of Gas said through his translator, his voice like wind through leaves. "That must involve dangerous work on hostile worlds." Sarah shrugged. "It had its moments. But honestly, I find Earth more challenging than most of the dead rocks I worked on." The students exchanged glances. How could this peaceful-looking planet be more dangerous than airless moons and toxic wastelands? Zekathera opened his textbook again. "Dr. Chen, we've studied your planet's wildlife classification. Most species appear to be low-threat herbivores and small scavengers. We should be able to observe them safely with our standard equipment." Sarah looked at the book over his shoulder. Her eyebrows went up slightly. "Is that what your book says?" "Yes, quite detailed documentation," Zekathera said proudly. "Compiled from orbital surveys and sensor data. Very thorough scientific analysis." Sarah bit her lip as if trying not to laugh. "Well, I suppose we'll see how thorough it is." The professor showed her a page with small black and white creatures. These, for example, listed as honey badgers, Category 2, small scavengers, minimal threat assessment. They appear completely harmless. This time Sarah did laugh, a short bark of amusement. "Honey badgers? Oh, you're in for a treat. Is something amusing?" Crystalline, who seeks knowledge, asked, her crystal body ringing like a bell. "Not amusing exactly," Sarah said, her smile fading. "But educational." "Definitely educational." Zekathera felt a small flutter of uncertainty. "Dr. Chen, is there something inaccurate about our data?" "Let's just say that orbital surveys might miss some important details," Sarah replied. "How about we start with a nice safe area? I know a lovely grassland preserve with some gentle herbivores." "Nonsense," Zekathera declared, his academic pride taking over. "We are scientists. We should follow proper protocol and observe the species according to our classification system. We'll start with these small scavengers." He pointed to the honey badger page again. "According to this, they should be easy to observe and completely non-threatening to beings of our size and technology." Sarah looked at the eager faces of the alien students. They were all so confident, so sure their advanced science had everything figured out. She remembered being that confident once before her first assignment on a safe planet that had nearly killed her 3 times in the first week. "All right," she said slowly. "If you insist on following your textbook, I know exactly where to find honey badgers. There's a preserve in Africa with a healthy population." "Excellent," Zekthara boomed. "Students, prepare your observation equipment. Standard survey gear should be more than adequate for these primitive creatures." The students hurried to gather their tools. They had energy shields, scanner devices, and deterrent fields designed to keep dangerous animals at bay. All state-of-the-art technology tested on dozens of worlds. Sarah watched them prepare and shook her head slightly. "I hope you brought some backup equipment." "Backup equipment?" Whisper of Gas asked. "Why would we need backup equipment for small scavengers?" "Oh, no reason," Sarah said innocently. "Just a suggestion." As the ship prepared to descend to Earth's surface, Sarah looked out at her home planet. She thought about all the creatures down there that the aliens' textbook had classified as harmless. The great white sharks listed as small aquatic vertebrates. The Cape buffalo described as docile herd animals. The chimpanzees labeled as simple tool users, and the honey badgers, those fearless, unstoppable little engines of destruction, dismissed as minimal threat small scavengers. She wondered how long it would take for the aliens to realize that their entire classification system was based on one fatal assumption: that evolution produced reasonable creatures who made sensible decisions about when to fight and when to run. Earth's creatures, Sarah knew, had never been particularly reasonable. "Dr. Chen," Zekthara called out, "we're ready to begin our descent. Are you excited to show us these harmless Earth animals?" Sarah smiled, remembering the last time she'd seen a honey badger in action. It had been fighting a cobra, a porcupine, and a young lion at the same time, and winning. "Oh, Professor," she said, "I can hardly wait." The transport shuttle touched down gently on the African grassland. The alien students pressed their faces against the windows, eager to see their first close look at Earth wildlife. Golden grass stretched in every direction under a bright blue sky dotted with white clouds. "Atmospheric readings are normal," announced the shuttle's computer. "Oxygen levels high but not toxic. Temperature within acceptable ranges for all species aboard." Zekthara checked his equipment one final time. His energy scanner beeped softly, showing no dangerous life forms in the immediate area. "Perfect conditions for our first field study." The shuttle doors opened with a quiet hiss. The aliens stepped out onto the soft earth, their various feet, tentacles, and crystal formations making different sounds on the ground. The air smelled of grass and earth and something wild that none of them could identify. Sarah stepped out last, breathing deeply. "Home sweet home," she said softly. "Crystalline who seeks." Knowledge immediately began scanning the area with her built-in sensors. Her crystal body flashed different colors as she collected data. "Fascinating biodiversity," she chimed. "So many different life forms in such a small area." In the distance, a herd of zebras grazed peacefully. Several giraffes moved slowly between scattered trees, their long necks swaying like gentle cranes. Birds flew overhead, calling to each other in voices that sounded almost musical. "See?" Zekthara said proudly. "Exactly as our textbook predicted. Peaceful herbivores going about their daily activities. No signs of the aggressive behavior found on more dangerous worlds." The Crixtal drones buzzed with excitement, their hive mind sharing observations instantly between all 3 units. "Professor, we are detecting many small mammals in the nearby vegetation. Should we begin our cataloging?" "Yes, but remember to maintain safe observation distances," Zekthara instructed. "Even though these creatures are harmless, we don't want to disturb their natural behavior." Sarah watched the aliens spread out across the grassland, their advanced equipment beeping and flashing as they recorded everything they saw. She noticed they had positioned themselves downwind from a small cluster of rocky outcrops where she knew honey badgers often denned. "Dr. Chen," Whisper of Gas called out, his cloudy form drifting toward her. "Your planet is quite beautiful. So much more colorful than the gas worlds of my people." "Thank you," Sarah replied, keeping one eye on the rocks. "It's home. We're pretty fond of it." About 50 meters away, Crystalline who seeks knowledge had found something interesting. Her crystal body rang with excitement as she called to the others. "Professor, I believe I've located one of the small scavengers from our textbook." The group gathered around her, following her pointing crystal finger. There, near the base of the rocky outcrop, a small black and white creature was visible. It was about the size of a house cat, with powerful-looking legs and a distinctive white stripe down its back. Zekathara consulted his textbook quickly. Yes, definite match. Honey badger, species classification, small scavenger, threat level minimal. He looked up with academic satisfaction. Our first confirmed sighting. The honey badger was busy with something on the ground. It appeared to be eating, its powerful jaws working on what looked like a long, dark rope. What's it feeding on? One of the Crixtal drones asked. Sarah squinted at the scene. Oh, that's a cobra. A big one by the look of it. The alien stared at her. A cobra? Whisper of Gas asked uncertainly. Venomous snake, Sarah explained casually. One bite can kill a human in about 20 minutes. But honey badgers are immune to most snake venoms. They hunt cobras for fun. Zekathara frowned and checked his textbook again. But it says here that honey badgers are scavengers. They should only eat already dead animals. Well, Sarah said, watching the honey badger tear chunks off the very dead cobra. Technically, the cobra is dead now. But how did it die? Crystalline, who seeks knowledge, asked. The honey badger killed it, Sarah replied simply. The professor's forearms waved dismissively. Impossible. Look at the size difference. That snake must have been twice the badger's length. A small scavenger couldn't possibly take down a predator like that. Sarah shrugged. Feel free to get closer and ask the honey badger how it happened. Crystalline, who seeks. Knowledge was already moving toward the creature, her crystal feet clicking on the rocks. This is a perfect opportunity to observe feeding behavior up close. My sensors can record everything. Crystalline, Sarah called out, her voice suddenly serious. I really wouldn't recommend that. But the crystal student was too excited to listen. She approached to within 10 meters of the honey badger, her body flashing as she activated her recording systems. The other students followed, maintaining what they considered a safe distance based on their textbook's threat assessment. The honey badger paused in its meal. It lifted its head and looked directly at the approaching aliens. Its small dark eyes showed no fear, no confusion, no intention of running away. Instead, it showed something that made Sarah take several large steps backward. It showed interest. Fascinating, Zekathara whispered, activating his own scanners.
Look how calm it is.
No fear response at all. Classic behavior for a non-threatening species. The honey badger dropped the cobra and stood up on its hind legs, getting a better look at these strange new creatures. It tilted its head to one side as if trying to decide something important. It's so small, Whisper of Gas observed. Surely even if it were aggressive, what could it possibly do to beings our size? Sarah was now backing away steadily, her hands raised in a gesture the aliens didn't recognize. Guys, she called out, trying to keep her voice calm. You really need to move away from it. Right now. Dr. Chen, you're being overly cautious, Zekathara said without taking his eyes off his scanner readings. Our equipment shows no elevated stress hormones, no aggressive pheromones, no indication of hostile intent. The honey badger made its decision. It dropped down to all fours, let out a sound that was part snarl and part war cry, and charged directly at the group of alien scientists. Impossible, Zekathara shouted as his scanner readings went crazy. It's too small to be a threat. The honey badger covered the distance to Crystalline, who seeks knowledge, in less than 3 seconds. It hit her crystal leg with the force of a small missile, its claws scraping against her diamond-hard surface with a sound like breaking glass. Crystalline shrieked in harmonics that shattered several nearby rocks. She had never encountered a creature that would attack something so obviously larger and more powerful than itself. Her defensive protocols had no programming for dealing with something this unreasonable. The honey badger bounced off her crystal form, rolled, and immediately came at her again. This time it went for her scanning equipment, tearing through metal and circuitry that was supposed to be indestructible. The other students scattered, their own defensive shields activating automatically. But the shields were designed to repel creatures that behaved logically, that could be deterred by force fields and warning signals. The honey badger ignored the shields completely. It treated them like they were mildly annoying rain and continued its assault on anything that moved. From her safe distance, Sarah watched the chaos unfold. The most advanced scientific expedition from multiple star systems was being routed by a single honey badger, who weighed less than 15 kilograms. "Dr. Chen," Zekthara called out as he retreated rapidly toward the shuttle. "Your textbook classification is completely wrong." Sarah cupped her hands around her mouth and called back, "That's not my textbook, Professor. That's yours." The honey badger, having thoroughly discouraged the alien visitors, returned to its cobra meal. It gave one final warning growl in their direction, then ignored them completely. As the aliens hurried back to their shuttle to regroup and treat Crystalline's damaged sensors, Sarah stayed where she was. She watched the honey badger eat, remembering the first time she'd seen one in action on a terraforming job. Her partner had said it looked cute and harmless. That partner had required medical attention for 3 hours after getting too close to a den. "Small scavenger," Sarah murmured to herself, shaking her head. "Minimal threat assessment. Someone clearly never met a honey badger." Inside the shuttle, chaos reigned. Crystalline, who seeks knowledge, sat in the repair bay, while automated systems tried to fix her damaged sensors. Her crystal body flickered with confused colors as she processed what had just happened. "This makes no sense," she kept repeating. "The creature was 1/20th my size. Basic physics should have prevented any meaningful damage." Zekthara paced back and forth on his 4 legs, his purple skin flushed with embarrassment and confusion. His 6 eyes kept darting between his textbook and the shuttle's medical displays showing Crystalline's injuries. "There must be an error in the creature's classification," he muttered. "No small scavenger behaves like that. It completely ignored our deterrent fields. It showed no fear response. It treated us like prey." Whisper of gas floated nervously near the ceiling, his gaseous form swirling with agitation. "Professor, I've run the calculation 17 times. That creature's attack patterns don't match any known evolutionary survival strategy. It should have fled when faced with obviously superior opponents." The 3 Krix-tall drones buzzed in tight formation, their hive mind working frantically to process the encounter. "Unknown behavior pattern," they chanted in unison. "Does not compute with established threat assessment protocols." Sarah Chen sat quietly in the corner, watching the aliens try to make sense of what they'd experienced. She remembered her first field training on Earth, how the instructor had warned them about assumptions. "Dr. Chen," Zekthara said suddenly, turning all 6 eyes toward her, "you knew this would happen, didn't you?" Sarah nodded slowly. "I suspected it might. But why didn't you warn us more clearly?" "I tried," Sarah replied calmly. "But you were confident in your textbook. Sometimes experience is the only teacher that gets through." Crystalline who seeks. Knowledge's crystal body chimed with a new thought. "Dr. Chen, are there more creatures on your world that behave like this honey badger?" Sarah was quiet for a long moment, thinking about how to answer. Finally, she said, "Well, that depends on what you mean by like this." "Aggressive beyond reason," Zekthara said, consulting his notes. "Willing to attack creatures many times their size. Ignore obvious signs of superior technology and power." "Oh," Sarah said, understanding dawning on her face. "You mean Earth animals in general?" The shuttle fell silent except for the humming of life support systems. "Earth animals in general?" Whisper of gas repeated slowly. Sarah stood up and moved to the shuttle's observation window. Outside, the African grassland looked peaceful and normal. But she knew what was really out there. "Let me tell you about Cape buffalo," she began. "Your textbook probably lists them as large herbivores or docile grazers, right?" Zekthara flipped through his book frantically. "Yes, here. Cape buffalo, Category 1, large herbivore, peaceful grazer, no threat to observers." Sarah smiled grimly. "Cape buffalo kill more humans than almost any other animal in Africa. They hold grudges. They remember individual people who've wronged them and hunt them down months later. They've been known to ambush humans who shot at them years earlier." The alien stared at her. "But they're herbivores," Crystalline protested weakly. "Yes," Sarah agreed. "They eat grass. They also enjoy trampling anything they perceive as a threat into paste. Just because something doesn't eat meat doesn't mean it won't kill you for fun." Zekthara was taking frantic notes. "What about the aquatic life? Surely creatures in water are more peaceful." Sarah laughed, a sound with no humor in it. "Oh, you want to talk about aquatic life? Let's see. Great white sharks, which your book probably calls small aquatic vertebrates, can bite through steel. Saltwater crocodiles, listed as semi-aquatic reptiles, can launch themselves completely out of the water to grab prey. And don't get me started on box jellyfish." "Box jellyfish?" the Krixtal drones asked nervously. Transparent, almost impossible to see, and so venomous they can kill you in 3 minutes, Sarah explained. Oh, and they actively hunt. Most jellyfish just drift around, but box jellies chase their prey. Whisper of Gas's form contracted into a tight ball. What about the small creatures? Surely tiny animals can't be dangerous? Sarah looked out at the grassland again. You want to know about small animals? Fire ants work together to build living rafts out of their own bodies during floods. Bullet ants have a sting so painful that some human cultures use it as a test of manhood. Mosquitoes kill more humans every year than any other animal on the planet. Mosquitoes? Zekthara asked faintly. Tiny flying insects that drink blood and spread diseases, Sarah said. You probably can't even see them on your scanners, but they're responsible for more human deaths than wars. The professor sat down heavily, his textbook falling from his hands. This is impossible. No ecosystem could function with every species being hyper-aggressive. We're not hyper-aggressive, Sarah protested. We're just competitive. Evolution on Earth has been running a very intense game for a very long time. The survivors are the ones who fight harder, run faster, think quicker, or adapt better than everything else. Crystalline, who seeks knowledge, had finally stopped flickering and was glowing a steady blue color. Dr. Chen, I have a question that I'm afraid to ask. Go ahead. If all of Earth's animals are like this, what about humans? Where do you fit in this ecosystem of aggressive survivors? The shuttle became very quiet. Sarah turned away from the window and looked at each alien in turn. She saw fear in their expressions, the dawning realization that they might have seriously misunderstood something important. Well, Sarah said slowly, let me put it this way. When I was working on terraforming projects, we had a saying, Earth animals survive. Everything else just lives. That doesn't answer the question, Zekthara said nervously. Sarah sat back down, her movements relaxed and casual. But the aliens were starting to notice things they'd missed before, the way her eyes constantly scanned the environment, how she positioned herself near exits, the fact that she'd known exactly how dangerous the honey badger was without checking any instruments. Humans, Sarah said conversationally, are the species that looked at honey badgers and thought they were interesting enough to make documentaries about. We're the ones who watched great white sharks and decided to get in the water with them for fun. We saw venomous snakes and thought, I wonder what would happen if we kept those as pets. She paused, letting that sink in. We're the species that survived on the same planet as everything I just described. Not just survived, thrived. We didn't develop natural armor or venom or claws. We developed something else. What? Whisper of Gas asked, his voice barely a whisper. Sarah smiled. And for the first time, the aliens noticed that human smiles could look very different depending on the context. We developed the ability to make everything else on the planet afraid of us. Outside the shuttle, a honey badger wandered past, still chewing on pieces of cobra. It glanced at the strange metal object but dismissed it as uninteresting. After all, it hadn't attacked back when challenged, so it was clearly harmless. The aliens watched it go, and began to understand that their classification system might need more than minor revisions. It might need to be completely rewritten from scratch. Despite the honey badger incident, Professor Zekthara's academic pride refused to let him abandon the expedition. 3 days later, the alien research team found themselves in a completely different environment, floating in a submersible craft 50 meters below the ocean's surface near the coast of South Africa. Underwater observation should be much safer, Zekthara announced, though his confidence sounded forced. Aquatic environments are typically more stable and predictable than terrestrial ones. The submersible was state-of-the-art, designed to withstand the pressure of gas giant atmospheres. Its transparent aluminum walls offered perfect views of the underwater world. Schools of colorful fish swam past like living rainbows, and the aliens began to relax for the first time since arriving on Earth. Crystalline, who seeks knowledge, her sensors finally repaired, was eagerly scanning the marine life. Much more peaceful down here, Professor. These creatures seemed content to ignore us completely. Sarah sat in the pilot's seat monitoring their position. She'd suggested staying closer to shore, but the aliens had insisted on deeper water for better observation opportunities. They were now hovering near a seal colony, and Sarah knew exactly what that meant. Dr. Chen, Whisper of Gas said, his form swirling with renewed enthusiasm, your planet's marine ecosystem appears far more civilized than the terrestrial one. Does it? Sarah asked, checking her instruments. That's interesting. Zekthara had his textbook open to the marine life section. Yes, look here. Small aquatic vertebrates, peaceful filter feeders, harmless bottom dwellers. Nothing like those aggressive surface creatures. One of the Krikstal drones detected movement in the distance. Professor, large marine life approaching. Shall we begin documentation? Through the blue water, a sleek, gray shape glided toward them. It moved with fluid grace, about 4 meters long, with a distinctive triangular fin cutting through the water above it. Perfect, Zekthara exclaimed, flipping through his book. A small aquatic vertebrate. According to this, they're bottom feeders, completely harmless to large objects like our submersible. Sarah glanced at the approaching shape and sighed. Professor, that's a great white shark. Shark? Crystalline asked, her crystal body ringing with curiosity. Apex predator, Sarah explained calmly, has been basically unchanged for millions of years because it's already evolutionarily perfect at what it does. Which is? The Krikstal drones asked in unison. Killing and eating things. Zekthara waved dismissively. Dr. Chen, you're being alarmist again. Our scans show it's only 4 meters long. Our submersible is 15 meters long and armored. Basic size comparison indicates no possible threat. The great white shark circled their vessel slowly, its black eyes studying the strange object that had invaded its territory. It had been attracted by the vibrations from their engines and the electrical fields from their equipment. Now it was trying to decide what this thing was and whether it might be food. Look how calmly it's behaving, Whisper of Gas observed. Clearly a peaceful creature just investigating us out of curiosity. Sarah watched the shark's movements and recognized the signs. The way it was positioning itself, the slight change in its swimming pattern. She quietly activated the submersible's emergency ascent system. Dr. Chen, Zekthara said sternly, what are you doing? We're in the middle of valuable observations. Getting ready to leave, Sarah replied, her hands moving over the controls. Right about now. The great white shark made its decision. It turned away from the submersible, swimming about 20 meters out. The aliens relaxed, thinking it was leaving. Then it turned back and accelerated. Fascinating, Crystalline said, watching the approaching shark. It appears to be returning for a closer look. The shark hit the submersible like a guided missile. The impact threw the aliens around inside their craft, alarms blaring as systems tried to compensate for the sudden shock. The shark's teeth scraped against the transparent aluminum, leaving white scratches across their perfect view. Impossible, Zekthara shouted over the alarms. It can't damage our hull. The materials are rated for pressures that would crush planets. The shark pulled back and hit them again, this time from a different angle. It wasn't trying to eat the submersible. It was testing it, figuring out what it was and how to deal with it. Sarah was already bringing them to the surface. Everyone hold on. We're leaving, but our research, the Krikstal drones protested. The shark followed them up, occasionally ramming the submersible just to remind them it was still there. When they breached the surface, it circled them twice more before disappearing back into the depths, apparently satisfied that it had made its point. The next day, the aliens insisted on observing what their textbook called docile herd animals in a safe grassland environment. Sarah led them to an area where Cape buffalo grazed peacefully in the distance. See, Zekthara said, pointing to the massive black animals. Large herbivores, just as our classification predicts, completely focused on eating grass. The Cape buffalo did indeed seem focused on eating grass. They moved slowly across the savanna, their heads down, looking for all the world like peaceful giants. They're magnificent, Crystalline said, her sensors recording everything. Such massive creatures, yet so gentle. Sarah was watching one particular buffalo that had raised its head and was staring directly at their group. That one's watching us. Natural curiosity, Zekthara dismissed. Herbivores often observe potential threats to determine if they need to move their herds to safety. The buffalo Sarah was watching started walking toward them. Not running, not charging, just walking with deliberate purpose. Why is it approaching? Whisper of Gas asked nervously. Maybe it wants to make friends, one of the Krikstal drones suggested. Sarah was already backing away. That buffalo recognizes me. Recognizes you? Zekthara asked. How could it possibly recognize you? I was here 6 months ago, Sarah explained, still backing away. That buffalo charged our research vehicle. We had to use emergency rockets to get away. I think it remembers. The buffalo's walk became a trot. Then a run. Then a full charge with nearly a ton of muscle and horn aimed directly at the group of scientists. "It's holding a grudge," Crystalline shrieked as they all ran for their vehicle. "Herbivores don't hold grudges." "Someone forgot to tell the buffalo that," Sarah called back as they scrambled into their transport. That evening, as they flew to their next location, the aliens huddled together trying to process what they'd learned. Their textbook lay open on the table, its neat classification suddenly seeming naive and dangerously incomplete. "Dr. Chen," Zekathara said quietly, "tomorrow we're scheduled to observe simple tool users in a forest environment. Please tell me there's at least one species on your planet that behaves according to reasonable expectations." Sarah thought about chimpanzees. Their tool use, their complex social structures, their territorial wars that could last for years. She remembered reading about chimps that had learned to make spears for hunting, chimps that had planned and executed coordinated attacks on neighboring groups. "Well," she said slowly, "chimpanzees are certainly educational." The aliens looked at her with growing dread. "They use tools, right?" Whisper of Gas asked hopefully. "Simple ones." Sarah nodded. "Oh yes, they use tools. They make spears. They use rocks as hammers. They've been observed making and using multiple types of tools for different purposes." "That sounds reasonably civilized," Crystalline said uncertainly. "They also wage war," Sarah added casually. "Organized strategic warfare that can go on for years. They make battle plans. They coordinate attacks. They take prisoners." The shuttle fell silent. "Dr. Chen," Zekathara asked very carefully, "when you say they take prisoners, you mean—" "I mean exactly what you think I mean," Sarah replied. "Earth doesn't really do simple anything, Professor. We specialize in taking basic concepts and making them terrifyingly complex." Outside the shuttle windows, the African landscape spread out below them, beautiful and peaceful in the golden light of sunset. Somewhere down there, honey badgers were hunting cobras, great white sharks were patrolling the coast, Cape buffalo were plotting revenge, and chimpanzees were probably planning their next territorial expansion. The aliens stared down at it all and began to understand that their textbook hadn't just missed a few details about Earth's wildlife. It had missed the entire point. The return journey to the orbital station was quiet. Too quiet. The alien students sat in their seats, staring at their data tablets and trying to make sense of everything they'd observed. Professor Zekathara had given up consulting his textbook entirely after the chimpanzee incident. The chimpanzees had been worse than anyone expected. Not content with simple tool use, they had demonstrated complex problem-solving, strategic thinking, and what could only be described as psychological warfare. When the research team had accidentally gotten between two rival groups, they'd found themselves in the middle of a coordinated military operation that would have impressed generals from any spacefaring civilization. Crystalline who seeks. Knowledge broke the silence first. "I need to revise my entire understanding of evolutionary biology," she said, her crystal form glowing a confused purple color. "Nothing we observed makes sense according to established scientific principles. The honey badger alone has forced me to create 17 new threat categories," Whisper of Gas added, his gaseous form swirling nervously. "And that's just for one species." The Crystal drones buzzed in agitated formation. "Hive mind consensus. Earth classification system requires complete reconstruction. Previous models insufficient for reality assessment." Zekathara looked up from his datapad, where he'd been frantically taking notes for the past 3 hours. "Dr. Chen, I have to ask you something, and I'm afraid I already know the answer." Sarah turned from the window where she'd been watching Earth grow smaller behind them. "What's that, Professor?" "In your professional assessment," Zekathara said slowly, "where would humans rank in our classification system?" The question hung in the air like a physical thing. The aliens had been dreading this moment since the honey badger attack, but they needed to know. Their entire understanding of galactic biology depended on it. Sarah was quiet for a long moment, looking back at her home planet. She thought about humanity's journey from caves to starships, about their wars and their art, their destruction and their creation, about the fact that they had looked at a universe full of hostile environments and decided to make it their home. "Well," she said finally, "let me ask you something first. What do you think about the classification system after spending a week on Earth?" Crystalline's body chimed with embarrassment. "It's completely inadequate. We classified creatures based on size, diet, and basic behavioral patterns. We never considered that evolution might produce species that ignore logical survival strategies. The honey badger was the first clue, Whisper of Gas admitted. When something that small attacked something that large without any hesitation, it broke our entire threat assessment model. But it wasn't just the honey badger, one of the Krixtal drones added. Every species we encountered behaved in ways our science said were impossible. Herbivores that hunt down enemies, predators that attack obviously superior opponents, tool users that wage strategic warfare. Zekthara set down his datapad and looked directly at Sarah. Dr. Chen, your planet has forced us to confront a troubling possibility. Which is? That our classification system assumes evolution produces reasonable creatures, species that make logical decisions about survival. But Earth seems to have produced something else entirely. Sarah nodded slowly. Earth evolution has been running a very intense competition for a very long time. The survivors aren't necessarily the strongest or the smartest. They're the ones who refuse to give up, the ones who fight harder than makes sense, the ones who survive by being too stubborn to die. And humans? Crystalline asked quietly. Sarah smiled, but it wasn't entirely a pleasant expression. Humans are the species that didn't just survive alongside honey badgers and great white sharks and Cape buffalo. We're the ones who looked at all of Earth's aggressive, unreasonable, dangerous wildlife and decided we belonged at the top of the food chain. But how? Whisper of Gas asked. You don't have natural weapons. No claws, no venom, no armor plating. No, Sarah agreed. We developed something better. We developed the ability to make tools, work together, and most importantly, to never give up. Ever. She stood up and walked to the main viewing window. Earth now just a blue dot behind them. When honey badgers attack something 50 times their size, your textbook calls it impossible behavior. When humans do the same thing, we call it Tuesday. The aliens exchanged glances. Humans, Sarah continued, are the species that looked at fire and decided to control it. We saw lightning and learned to harness it. We found deadly plants and figured out how to make medicine from them. We discovered that space is a hostile vacuum that kills everything, so naturally we decided to live there. Zekthara was writing frantically again. Dr. Chen, are you saying that humans are essentially honey badgers with advanced technology? Sarah laughed, a sound that somehow managed to be both warm and terrifying. Professor, honey badgers fight until they win or die. Humans fight until we win. We don't really have a die option in our vocabulary. We just have different ways of winning. But surely there must be things that humans fear, Crystalline protested. Every species has natural predators or environmental threats that cause retreat behavior. Sarah thought about that seriously. Well, we're afraid of some things. Disease, natural disasters, the heat death of the universe. But our response to fear isn't to run away. Our response is to study the thing we're afraid of until we figure out how to defeat it. You study things in order to defeat them? The Krixtal drones asked in unison. Of course, Sarah said, as if it were obvious. Humans have conquered diseases that killed millions. We've learned to predict and survive natural disasters. We're working on fixing aging, preventing extinction events, and eventually figuring out how to outlast the universe itself. The shuttle's computer announced that they were approaching the orbital station. Through the windows, they could see the massive research vessel waiting for them. Dr. Chen, Zekthara said as they prepared to dock, I need to ask one final question for my report. Go ahead. When you were working in terraforming, making dead planets suitable for life, how did you handle the dangerous environments? The toxic atmospheres, the radiation, the hostile conditions? Sarah shrugged. Same way humans handle everything. We studied the problems, built better tools, and refused to accept that it couldn't be done. Terraforming isn't about finding perfect worlds. It's about taking impossible worlds and making them perfect. As they docked with the main ship, Zekthara closed his datapad and looked at his students. I'm going to recommend that the Galactic Wildlife Classification Committee create an entirely new category for Earth species. What would you call it? Crystalline asked. Evolutionary impossibilities, Zekthara replied. Creatures that survive by ignoring the basic rules of survival. And humans? Whisper of Gas asked. Zekthara thought about honey badgers charging creatures 50 times their size. About great white sharks that had remained unchanged for millions of years because they were already perfect. About Cape buffalo that held grudges and chimpanzees that waged war. Then he thought about the species that had not only survived on the same planet as all of these creatures, but had eventually become the dominant life form. The species that looked at an entire planet of aggressive, unreasonable, dangerous animals and decided they belonged in charge. For humans, he said slowly, I think we'll need to create an entirely new classification system. Because any species that can look at honey badgers and think they're cute enough to make nature documentaries about them is clearly operating by rules we don't understand. 6 months later, the Galactic Wildlife Classification Committee issued its most extensive revision in history. Earth was reclassified from a developing world to a zone of extreme evolutionary interest with recommended minimum safe distance. The honey badger entry, which had once read Category 2, Small Scavenger, Minimal Threat Assessment, now simply stated, see attached 847-page supplemental report. Recommended Approach Protocol, Different Star System. The human entry was even shorter. Classification impossible using current scientific frameworks. Recommend philosophical consultation before contact. But perhaps the most telling change was in the introduction to the manual itself, which now began, warning. This manual is based on the assumption that evolution produces reasonable survival strategies. Users are advised that certain planets may contain species that have evolved beyond reason. Approach with extreme caution and an open mind. Sarah Chen continued her work in wildlife conservation on Earth, occasionally hosting other alien research teams. She always warned them about the honey badgers. Most of them didn't listen, but they learned. Thank you for watching and comment for next part.